To harness the full potential of the labor force, we need to reimagine work. We need to redesign workplaces so that they are better aligned with the lives of the people who work in them. And we need to redefine what makes a good and successful employee so that performance is no longer measured by how many hours an employee puts in, but by how effective and efficient employees can be. The Redesigning Work Summit brings together leading academics, corporate experts, policymakers, and the media to set a new research agenda for the 21st century. Our goal is to redesign and redefine work so that people and businesses thrive.
The purpose of this video is to explain why the way we work needs to change. Work needs to change because the composition of the workforce has changed and because the kind of work we do has changed. Current workplace practices have not kept pace with these changes. Throughout history, what work is, how it's organized, meaning where we work, what we do for work, and how many hours we work, and cultural norms and expectations about work have looked very different. While historically what work is and what it looks like have come in many shapes and sizes, we seem to have forgotten this. Today, we are locked into a frame of reference that sees work in a narrow and rigid term. All too often, work is seen as something that cannot be changed or be done differently. But of course, it has been done differently before. And if we are going to address demographic transformations and create work environments that foster innovation and creativity, things need to change.
I think that the intersection of diversity and what we're talking about here rests in the fact that people who are different, more and more people who are different, are coming into the workplace. Culturally different, globally different, millennials, boomers, they're all quite different. And each of us has different values and different sets about what allows us to work most effectively. That's what we've got to be thinking about when we're talking about redesigning. We can't have a one-size-fits-all.
Indeed, changes to the workforce and to work have been dramatic. We will highlight these changes, touching on demographics, values of workers, the changes in the nature of work itself, and technology.
There's no doubt that the composition of our labor force has changed tremendously over the last half century. Today, women have flooded into paid labor. More employees are in dual-earner couples. People are working later into life. The millennials have come on the scene. And these workers, the people who are actually in our workplaces, have different needs and in some cases different values. Indeed, what some have called the one-size-fits-all workplace operates on sort of a 1950s model, where the ideal worker is someone that we imagine is going to be working year-round, year in, year out, full-time with no major career interruptions on a rigid career path, putting in long hours of face time in the office with no competing demands. Now, this ideal worker was always sort of a mythical figure, but to the extent that he ever existed, he's certainly a vanishing species today.
You've probably heard people are living longer, and societies are getting grayer. And this is seen by many to be a crisis on the horizon. My colleagues and I at the Stanford Center on Longevity see this as a great opportunity to profoundly, dramatically change the way that we live our lives. And work is a key target of that change. And one of the things that we maintain is that working longer and working differently may improve quality of life at all ages. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is this. In the 20th century, we added an average of 30 extra years to life expectancy in this country. And so far, we have put all of the added years in retirement. And it's not working out. It's not working out at a societal level, and much of that problem you hear about is sort of breaking the bank of infrastructures like Social Security. I think the bigger issue is the loss of human capital. So we're losing people to retirement who could be contributing actively to culture. But it's also not working out for many individuals, women in particular. It is very hard for most Americans to work for 40 years and during that 40 years of work save enough money to not work for what could be another 30 years. We increased life expectancy so fast that the culture that guides us through life hasn't had a chance to catch up. The increase in life expectancy is a story about culture. And by culture, I mean the crucible that holds science and technology and broad social norms and efforts to change the health and the well-being of entire populations. Culture is what brought about this change, and we need to change culture now to accommodate the longer lives that we have created. And so here we are, living at a point in human history where 4, 5, and conceivably 6 generations will be alive at the same time. Unprecedented in the history of humankind.
The nature of work itself has changed. Increasingly, the routine mechanical work that's going on. So those tasks are on a downswing. And what's on an upswing are things like problem solving, analysis, creativity, complex relationship work that you need for the services part of the economy. And that shift is really important because the way that you motivate human performance also has to shift when the nature of work shifts. So pay for performance worked really well when we were doing this mechanical manual labor. It doesn't work well at all when what we're after is innovation. And it's really left us at a point where sort of the corporate coffers for motivation are pretty bankrupt, and the rates of innovation that we need to get our economy revitalized continue to elude us.
One need or value that appears to be especially important to large swaths of our workforce is the ability to work more flexibly. And by that I mean for employees to have more control over when and where they work. A study from Ellen Galinsky's group from 2008 found that the great majority of employees in her survey, 87%, said they valued flexibility when considering a job, 87%. But far fewer had that flexibility. Only 36% had even more than very minimal control over their schedules.
I actually started 2 businesses focused on the needs of workers. In 2006, I started a company called Flexperience, and it was about connecting experienced professionals, mostly working mothers who were in this sort of opt-out phenomena, with flexible projects. And so they were independent consultants solving problems for companies. And what I learned from that work was that the worker challenge, or the desire of workers, really extended beyond to millennials, baby boomers, triathletes, and PhDs, people who were getting advanced degrees but wanted to do project-based work. So if you think about putting and elevating the needs of workers on the same way that you put the needs of your customer, then you're really giving equal weight to the needs of workers. What do they need? What do they want? What do they value? Just like you ask, what do our customers need? What do they want? What do they value? And so when that happens, I think it really unleashes the creativity and innovation, and those are the companies where HR really sits at the table with the CEO and makes really interesting and important decisions around the future of work, meeting the needs of the workers and the needs of the workplace.
Technology has dramatically changed the tools with which we work. And as a matter of course, that has changed the very nature of work itself.
If we were to walk into any office or whatever today, the way people work looks different than it would have 50 years ago. So in much the same way that the invention of electricity at the start of the last century allowed people to work when the sun went down for the first time, technology today has changed both when and with whom we can work. So global teams are not only possible, they're ever more common, connecting workers, I think, in ways that were simply not imaginable 50 years ago.
It's really hard to change things. We have these institutional logics built into the way we do things. And one thing we assume is that people need to work at work at certain times and places. That made sense when the technology was such that you had to be wed to the typewriter or the desktop computer or the landline telephone, and that you had to keep all these files somewhere. That made sense. Now we have new technologies, and we need to rethink where, when, and how work is done.
We examined why the culture of work is stuck in a 1950s model, despite dramatic changes in the workforce, the nature of work, and the power of technology to change where and when we work. Next, we need to examine the costs of this outdated model of work.
In 1930, the economist John Maynard Keynes famously predicted that in 100 years, Americans would work just 15 hours per week. Keynes would surely have been surprised to learn that Americans today are working more rather than less. Between 1979 and 2007, the average American worker increased his or her work hours by 181 hours per year. Nowadays, 38% of all professional men and 14% of all professional women engage in overwork, which means they work more than 50 hours per week. So despite changes in technology and productivity, workplaces today are demanding greater time commitment. And anybody who wants less than extreme work hours is penalized through fewer promotions, lower rewards, and less visibility.
Even if we do every single thing else right, we will not tap the talent pool unless we address the hours problem. And organizations will not only lose most mothers and most women, they will lose many millennial men.
We are at a crossroad. We need to make a leap, to invest in redesigning work instead of changing the people to fit in these outdated workplace structures. What's at stake is the very future of work, the future of families, the well-being of all individuals, and our competitive advantage.
We have to invest in people. We've got to invest in them from the minute they enter the workforce and help prepare them to be successful in that workforce. It's in the best interest of the country and the economy, and obviously in the best interest of some of the most talented people that we have in this country.
I think that we, and I use the term we here to mean people in this room who've done such great work, and all the other people out there that are sort of like us, but not here, we've done a lot since our workplaces have become more diverse to help diverse people fit into existing workplace structures, into existing workplace cultures, into existing workplace practices. So we've trained women, for example, on how to negotiate. We've created mentorship programs for people of color. We've created support groups in workplaces for LGBT people. We've done lots of these things, and these have been very, very important. But in my judgment, we've probably gotten about as far as we're going to get with this approach. The next step is that we need to change the structure of work. Even though we often treat work like it cannot be changed, it can and it has. And this is really the next step if we want to create workplaces that fully harness the talent of all of our workers.